This is Jonathan Pajot. Welcome to the Symbolic World.
Brothers and sisters, Reverend Fathers, your grace, Christ is risen. He is risen. It's good to see you all this evening. We are going to go ahead and get started. So find a seat or sit on somebody else. And I know it's really wonderful to see everything so full. It's my great pleasure to have the honor of introducing my good friend, Jonathan Pajot. And we were talking a little bit before, and I was trying to decide how best to introduce him. And I was like, well, what are my most embarrassing Jonathan stories? You know, there's also, you know, one of the things that people ask me quite often is, how did you start working together? I mean, after all, I'm from Texas, thank God, and he's French. And you know, and so the quick story that I'll tell is that several years ago, I'm the sort of person, as most of you probably know, I like to read really old, interesting, weird, obscure things. And so I was reading these things, and I was posting about some of the stuff that I was reading on the, specifically something called the Sibylline books, which if you've watched our Universal History videos, you go back for the first couple, you'll see some stuff in there about them. Anyway, so I was posting about this in the Symbolic Road community, and I think Jonathan was like, who is this guy? Or what is he posting it like? You know, and so we started having a conversation about this, and then eventually said, well, let's do a podcast. And then the podcast turned into another podcast, and turned into another podcast, and then basically I sort of just moved in, you know? And then, you know, several years later now, when it's been 3 or 4 years, I guess, since we started doing that series together, and we've got a wonderful publishing company, the Symbolic World Press, that's been one of the great joys and frustrations and all of those things of my life is to work on that with you. And but we've got a table at the back, and there are some flyers that I think some of you were handed when you came to the door. Does anybody have a flyer? I meant to have one to hold up. Somebody, there we go. Yeah, thank you. So there's some flyers you've gotten at the door, and I think we still have a few left. And this has a little bit about our work, including a QR code. So there's 2 things here that I just want to call your attention to. Jonathan won't do this. He's terrible at marketing our stuff, man. Come on, my children have to eat, Jonathan. No, but I just want to point out 2 things. One is that we have the next book in our fairy tale collection. We have the first 2 back there at the table. If you haven't grabbed one already, please come by. We have a few left. And the next book in our series is Rapunzel and the Evil Witch, and this comes out sometime this summer. And it's really beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful books that I have ever read in my life. And I'm just so excited about getting to bring it to all of you. So there's a QR code here. There's going to be a kind of a shorter release in the summer before the rest of the books arrive. And so if you want to be in on that first release, which is pretty limited, you can sign up for early access there. The other thing is that we're currently doing a course for the Symbolic World Press. So some of you may know we have courses on literature, medievalism, the Inklings, things like this. And so right now Jonathan is teaching an amazing course. It's our symbolism masterclass, and it's really basically, it's all the things Jonathan won't say in public, you know? It really is kind of that though. Like, I know that some of you here are actually taking the course right now. And there were some things like this last week. I was like, oh wow, he said the thing. You know, it's great. It's really, really great. And so we are actually offering a discount on that as well. So if you scan this QR code right here, you can use the code DFW10 to get 10% off of the cost of that course. So anyway, get a flyer, check these things out, check out our table in the back, and Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. All right. And so, Your Grace, Reverend Fathers, thank you for the invitation. It is always a joy to come to Texas, to come to Dallas. I'm starting to think of it a little bit as my second home. I really enjoy coming here. And as Richard was presenting, I really enjoyed my growing relationship with him. You know, when he said that he was reading the Sibylline Oracles, because the Sibylline Oracles is a very, very strange and and very niche thing that not many people know about, but it has a very strong, let's say, importance in this idea of what we call universal history, which is the sense that some of the things that the ancients were talking about were actually leading to Christ, and that the early Christians and that the church were able to discern that even in some of the pagan works or some of the stranger aspects. They're able to say, oh, wait, this is weird, but it also simultaneously points to Christ. And so these are the things that interest us. But today I'm going to talk to you about art. I'm going to talk about a very particular moment in which we are now. I want to say that we are in an extremely exciting moment. A lot of people who are coming here know that. So many people I know who are here today are new converts, catechumen, a lot of young people who have discovered Orthodoxy and have seen in our holy tradition a key, and a key that opens up so many aspects of the world. Of course, our spiritual life, of course, our movement, our struggle towards salvation, to be united with God and to Christ, but also something else, which is an entire network of relationships, of beauty in terms of the visuals, in terms of the music, in terms of how these fit together, the architecture, and so all of these things come as this revelation of something that we feel like we had slowly lost in the West, something that had been there in the early centuries, but that was slowly eroded. And so we have access to this whole language that is coming to us. And when we discover this language, we realize that it's not alien. Because some people will say, Orthodoxy, it's really interesting because it's foreign, it's Eastern, it's kind of spicy, it's the Oriental. And there's a little bit of that, which is true. And some people are attracted to that maybe mystery at the outset. But once you start to live in the Orthodox Church and in the life of an Orthodox Christian, you realize that this language is the language of Christianity. Like I said, the one that was there in the East and the West and was slowly eroded in the West. And so it's a way back, not only in terms of faith, but back to our own roots that we feel like we've lost over time. And so it's an exciting time because all this energy is coming into the church. And all this energy is coming into the church at a moment when we feel like the culture around us is fragmented. Right? We feel like art, culture, music, cinema, everything is just running out. Right? The stories are running out. Nobody knows what story to tell. Nobody knows what images are important. Nobody is able to know what to listen to. The music has been reduced to like mumble rap, like 3 beats that just are repeated, after one after the other. The cinema has been reduced to this basically propaganda. And so, on the one hand, we are grieving, but on the other hand, it is exciting. Because when something decomposes, it becomes earth in which to plant a new seed. When the darkness grows, then the candle shines brighter. And so it is an opportunity for creative people, for artists, for people who want to be able to speak into the chaos, to actually have a voice and to actually make a melody which has been drowned out for centuries audible again. And not only for people in the church, of course, firstly for us in the church, but also for people outside. Because there is something undeniable about beauty that no one can stop looking at once they get a glimpse of it. When somebody walks into a church, and walks under the dome, I don't care where you're from. I don't care what your background is. You cannot resist the effect that it will have on you, right? And that is true of the music, and it is true of the stories that we gather, the story of the saints, the legends, even the weirder stuff that kind of creeps in the margins of our tradition, all of these are an amazing network of things that we can capture, all right? And so, but in order to do so, we have to first understand the state of the world in which we're in, and then understand what does it mean? What is it that we offer as an alternative to the current state? Like I said, we have to be able to understand the state of culture and the state of art in the contemporary world, because sometimes with all the best intentions in the world, and even with all the beauty that surrounds us and all the beauty that we're part of, we still have certain diseases inside us. We still have certain perverse ways in which we understand culture, we understand art, we understand human making. And we can, if we're not careful, we can bring these into the church, and we can also bring them into our desire to speak into the culture that's around us. So it's a good idea to kind of first do the medical inquiry and give the diagnosis, and then after that we can look at what I believe how Orthodox art and the Orthodox vision is a cure for that disease. And so one of the things that happened after the Middle Ages that led to us, and it's a perverse element of some of the best art that the West has produced, is the idea of the artist and the public. Right? It's the idea of the painter and the viewer, the performer and the public. We have this notion, right? And so when we think of art, we think of it in that way. That's the way we tend to think of it. We think that, well, what is art? I will go to a concert and then I will sit and then people will play music for me, then I'll applaud and then I'll leave. But first of all, there's nothing wrong with that. Like that is fine. But there is an issue in that problem, which is that at some point, art becomes something like a consumable, becomes something to consume. Art is a product, just like a can of Coke or just like a hamburger. I got my popcorn and I got my movie, and I'm consuming this. So I'm a client, right? I'm a buyer, and now this is the product that I'm purchasing in order to satisfy certain needs that I have, whether it's to be distracted, whether it's to be elated, or whatever it is that I want to feel, right? And this is the way that we understand art. Like everything, cinema, TV, all of that falls into that category, okay? And so the image of this notion of art as a consumable, I love this because there's all these layers of consumables in this image. It's like, we're gonna have a great night of art and culture. We go to see the symphony, play Star Wars music, and so we have this beautiful experience of listening to the music from a movie, and it's wonderful. Like it's great, it's fun, okay, and it falls into ultimately this sense of fashion, right? Art becomes a slave to fashion. And what you realize is that we are obsessed with novelty, and we are looking for novelty, and we have a really high-minded vision of novelty. And we have this sense of confused novelty with that dirty word progress, right? Art has to move forward. Art has to be new, it has to change, it has to break boundaries and everything. But ultimately what you notice is that really what it is, it's just fashion. I think fashion is another word for acedia, right? Fashion is another word for distraction. Fashion is another word for the cycles of attention, right? That you just have to keep, like, how can I say this? Like the little thing has to come poke out again and shake at you so that you look at it, and then you get bored, and then another thing comes up and pokes at you, and you're like, oh, and then you get bored. And that's what the wheel of fashion in which you're in, And what's interesting, like I said, is that there was a time when this could have been convincing, and I totally understand how people kind of went into this thinking, oh, this new movement of art, this new style of cinema, this new way of filming, this new type of music, it is breaking ground, it is progress, and it is this new thing. But now we're at the moment where we've seen that now it's just all recycled. And that whatever supposed novelty happened in culture happened for a very short burst of time, maybe at the beginning of the 20th century, maybe a little bit after World War II, and then now we're just basically recycling. And so I watch my daughters all of a sudden wear jeans like up to their belly button, and I'm like, wait a minute, how did the 80s come back? I thought that was like the most like kitschy. Obviously, nobody does that now anymore. Yeah, they're really cool. But like you have these weird things that just keep cycling back. They just, and it's like, but it's just still this idea that it's progressing. But now, because it's been such a long time that this way of thinking has been in the world, we can actually see its fruits, right? And we you know about flash fashion, right? This idea of fashion that lasts literally for like 3 weeks, right? And everybody goes on these websites and they like buy the latest thing, and then they wear it for like 2 weeks, and then if you still wear it after that, you are not cool anymore, right? And it's just like these really fast cycles of attention. But like I said, that is winding down, because at some point it just becomes a ridiculous, you notice that it's just a ridiculous carnival wheel that's just spinning faster and faster. And that there is very little, first of all, actual novelty, and that a lot of novelty is really just like a little clown going like this and shaking, looking for scandal in order to attract attention, looking for some shocking thing that will attract attention. But it's been evacuated because, it's like the suggestion of sexuality in like 1950s rock and roll sounded really edgy and really exciting. But by the time you're like now, and you just got like basically a strip show on stage and just like this disgusting behavior, it just makes you want to vomit. But it's like it was like this idea that, no, this is pushing the boundary, like this is so exciting. And now it's just like, okay, yeah, thank you, but no thank you. Enough, all right? You need something more than that.
Hi, this is Sarah from Hamilton, and I'm very happy to announce my first course with Symbolic World, Scripture, the Key to Reality. Over the span of 5 weeks, we will look at the scriptural vision of reality through the lens of the temple. We will see how all the details of Scripture orbit around the person of Jesus Christ, the eternal Word of God and archetype of the world. And we will see how that Christological vision firmly earths in place the concrete details of Israel's Torah and story. Through that lens, you will come to see how meaning and matter intersect and intertwine, not only in the text of Scripture, but in the very tapestry of reality unveiled by the Bible.
So in that sense, there is also, like I said, this idea that's related to the notion of consumable that I've already been talking about, is the notion of art as revolution. And this is something that started to become very prominent, of course, in the early 20th century, with all the painting movements. You had Picasso, you had Cubism, Surrealism, Futurism, all of these artistic movements that presented themselves not in continuation of what was there before, not as a taking forward of the flame in the sense of like a memory of where I come from that is being passed down to the person after me, as we know we call tradition. But no, we're going to snuff out that flame, because that flame is tyranny, that flame is, it's oppressive because it stifles our creativity. We want to be free, we want to do whatever we want to open up creativity in the most ways that we can, and therefore we envision art as revolution. And if you think about it, if you listen to cultural commentary, it just creeps in all the time. People are always presenting art as revolution. But at the same time, the revolutionary trope basically played itself out in the early 20th century. It was like a flash, right? We went from an exciting revolution to this, right? And it happened in 10 years, super fast. Right? Basically, taking the most random object, putting it in a gallery and saying, this is art. This is, of course, Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp's urinal that was put up in a gallery in 1917. Caused a scandal, because it was so revolutionary. Caused a scandal, people broke it. Sure, the artist was super happy, got attention. I'm breaking the rules, I'm part of the revolution. But what about now it's been 100 years since this happened. And now what? Right, now what? We just repeat this revolutionary gesture over and over and over. How did you think we could you never thought we could get a tradition of revolution. It's like we have this tradition of revolution where we're just constantly turning this wheel and revolving anyway. I just watched on the plane here, I actually watched the Bob Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown. It's a good movie. It's definitely worth it. But look at this. He defied everyone to change everything. And in the movie, that's how he's presented, And it's super interesting. I'm going to spoil it for you. Sorry, it's not like it's a big mystery. Right? The whole movie is about how Bob Dylan gets trapped in the world of folk music, and he's kind of looking to break out of folk music and to move into rock so he can change the world. And it ends where he's at this folk festival. Like, it's a folk festival. It's a folk music festival. And the people at the folk music festival are just telling him, Mr. Dylan, this is a folk music festival. That's the boundary of this place. If you want to come here, just play folk music. And he's like, oh man, I can't do it. I'm gonna break all the rules. I'm gonna break all the rules. And it just, to me, it's just so tired. It's like, are we still telling this story after 100 years? Breaking rules is not complicated. It's like, it's not a big mystery. You have a pattern and you break it. I don't understand why that's such a big deal. It's like, all right, okay, I'm going to toss everything here right now. So I'm going to show you that I don't care about this place. It's like, okay, it's such a trope. You know what it looks like. Rebellion looks like very clearly, you just do something different. But doing something different looks the same. It ends up just all looking the same, right? It's like, a punk rocker wears a uniform, folks. I can tell a punk rocker from a mile away because he's a rebel. And he looks like every other rebel that ever existed in the history of rebels. Okay, but it's really important to understand to understand this. And the thing is that it's still here today. This is an artist, his name is Weiwei. He's probably one of the most important visual artists right now in the world. He's a Chinese artist. And here he is, being an artist. He takes this beautiful vase, ancient, dynasty vase, and he drops it and breaks it. And that is his great act of revolution. And this wasn't made in 1917. This was made 10 years ago, 15 years ago. His most famous piece of art is him, flipping off the White House. Have you seen this image? Probably not. That's just a picture of him flipping off the White House. All right. That's it. All right, Mr. Weiwei, I guess, But you have to be able to attend to it. You have to be able to notice it because you'll hear it constantly. You'll watch a movie and they'll say, oh, this has never been done before. This is a complete new way, a complete revolution on how things were done before. But it's not even possible anymore. It's like everything in that sense has been done. The revolution. One of the things, by the way, if you want to notice, interestingly enough, in terms of the revolutionary trope, is that because it's just been done over and over and over and over, now if you want to make art that's revolutionary, you almost have to remind people of a world that was kind of orderly and traditional, and then upend it. Right? So what are you doing? You're just recasting the tradition and then upending it and then recasting it and upending it, right? So it's a simple move, but it's one which people think is the deepest aspect of culture. And that brings us, of course, this type of thing that also brings us to this notion that we see now, which is this idea of art as social engineering. or art as propaganda. Because a lot of people intuitively at some point realize that breaking things is not enough. That you can't just be breaking things. So people want to say, well, I want to make art that builds something. I get it, right? I want to make art that participates in something, participates in a project, participates in building something. But what we end up with, sadly, is something that is more akin to propaganda. And that has been, in some ways, the case, especially in the past 2 decades, especially in pop culture. We've kind of seen propaganda infiltrate the world of art in ways that make it just boring. Because nobody likes propaganda, actually. This is actually, I actually decided to choose a version of this is Shepard Fairey's poster. This is actually quite nice. It's not the drivel of propaganda that we say, but you can see that it is fine art that is in the service of a politician, right? It's fine art that's in the service of politics, that's in the service of a social ideal. But there are so many examples of this. And I decided to choose the deepest one. Yes. This also brings in everything about like fashion and consumable as well. It's all kind of layered into the same image. And so Kevin Smith revamped He-Man. For those, I'm sure everybody here knows who He-Man is. He-Man is a figure of my childhood. Especially Generation X childhood, was a toy. He was like kind of like this barbarian figure, and they had toys, we had animations, and it was like this mythical world, obviously downstream from Tolkien and all of that kind of mythical imagination. And it was campy, it was fun, whatever. It was the way to sell toys. We get it. And so they decided to revamp this, obviously, because now all the Gen Xers are adults with kids. So it's like, we need to make things for the Gen Xers so that they can buy it for their kids and so that the kids like it. That's how it works. A lot of recycled IPs are about that, like capture the Gen Xers so that they buy it for their kids. And so he does this revamp of He-Man. So look at the poster, like right there he is, He-Man, he's got the power, he's in the middle. But when you watch it, what they do is they replace He-Man with a female character. This has been a trope that's just been going on over and over and over. It's like you have this character, it's the main character of your IP, and then you replace the character in the IP with a female protagonist. And of course, the reason you want to do this is for revolutionary reasons. It is for all the reasons that we know, but what it ends up doing, because it's not natural, because it's forced, because it's like trying to inject something into a story that has its own coherence, is that it looks fake and it's boring, right? Can we have a story with a powerful female protagonist, an interesting female protagonist? Of course we can. There have been stories like that forever. We have stories in the Bible like that. We have great stories of saints that drove spikes into the heads of their enemies in the Bible, right? So it's not like that doesn't exist. It's not like we don't know about that. But if you try to inject that stuff into a story, try to force it on us, right, it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit. And then we end up with a disaster, which is something that nobody cares about. And that has been, for us, to our great service. Because the past 15 years, 20 years, has been an increasing amount of these propaganda-type stories, this kind of infecting of all the things that the Gen Xers cared about, and basically subverting them towards political means, making them boring, making them uninteresting, making them lose money, losing money. Disney is just losing money on every single project that it's doing. They wreck Star Wars, they wreck Marvel now, they've wrecked all the IPs that they own, trying to inject their political ideology, this kind of activistic propaganda stuff, and now nobody cares anymore. And so in some ways we reach the end, and I think this is the end. I went to see this movie. I did. I went to see it in the cinema. And it was a very exciting thing to watch. Because yes, it was boring. Yes, it was injected with all kinds of nonsense. The story didn't make any sense. But the reason why the story didn't make any sense was fascinating. Because this Snow White movie is like two movies fighting with each other. When you're watching it, you can tell that there's two movies in there, and they're duking it out. Because they tried to make it into a propaganda piece, and then they showed it to people. People were so disgusted by it, and the fandom was freaking out, and so they panicked. And then they put it off for a year, and then they panicked again, and they put it off for another year, and they refilmed almost the entire thing, made it into like a $300 million movie. And when you watch it, you can see that it's over, right? Because you feel in it that they're like, oh, damn it, we have to reintroduce these things that we hate, these things that are actually part of the story. We actually have to have the prince kiss Snow White. Oh my goodness, it's so frustrating for them. And they put it in. If you watch it, it's funny because it's like, obviously that scene in the movie, in the original Snow White, in the fairy tale and in the early Disney version, that's the culmination of the story, where the prince comes and she's dead, right? It's a resurrection moment, and he kisses her and he brings her into the kingdom of heaven. It's like the image of Christ. It's like this beautiful moment. In this movie, it's like, he's just gonna kiss her, and she kind of sits up, and it's like, yeah, they put it in there, but they're really not happy. But, like I said, it's a great sign. It's actually a great sign of hope, because it means that everybody now knows that it's over. Now, what do we do? And everybody's panicking. I have some insights into that world a little bit through friends and through people that I know, and nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what to do. Everybody's panicking. And all these studios all have products that are in production right now that they know are going to fail. But they have no choice. They already put the money in, they're already kind of moving with it, where the ball's already rolling, they can't stop it, and they know by the time that it's out that it's going to fail. And everybody's scrambling to figure out, what do we do? And so, this is it. This is an opportunity. And the question is, now what? Or what does this have to do with us? Now, we offer an alternative. Now, the problem with this alternative is that it's a very, very deep alternative. It is one which, in the sense of revolution, is deeper than the revolutions that we've seen for a very long time. In the sense of how transformative it is extremely transformative. But it means that we have to also understand that it won't be able to do the same things as the culture that was there before us was able to do. Because that we're not aiming for the same ideas. Right? So in the 19th century, Richard Wagner, who wrote these crazy, insane operas, was looking, and a lot of the artists were looking for the perfect work of art. And they were kind of saying, what is the most complete work of art, right? And this is what Wagner called the Gesamtkunstwerk, which is this idea of the complete art. What is the total artwork? And there was obviously argumentation about what is the most complete, or what is the art that contains the most in it? And then Wagner came to the conclusion that it was opera. And why was it opera? It was opera because opera has all the arts brought together in one art. Because it's composition, right? It's a visual composition. It has music. It has narrative. It has a sense of architecture, right? It is an inhabiting of space, etc., etc. And so he thought, this is it. This is the perfect art because it brings everything together. Some people have said after that maybe the cinema is actually the Gesamtkunstwerk, because for the same reason, because you have the cinema, you have the visual composition, right? You have the narrative, you have the score, maybe you have even songs in it, and it kind of is an extension of this vision of opera into the culture. Now, the question is, what is it missing? It's missing one essential thing, very essential thing, actually. It's missing the thing that I hinted at the outset. It's missing participation. That's what it's missing. It's missing that it's not me sitting there watching the story, but that it's me in the story, right? That's the Gesamtkunstwerk. And that's what liturgy offers. Because in the liturgy, we have all of it. We have music, we have visual, we even have smell, which they don't have in the opera. We have the music, we have the architecture, we have the smell, we have all of that. We even eat. You know, we even use our sense where we eat the body of Christ. So all of the senses, all of the cultural references are all drawn together, but at the same time, we are inside. We are not watching it from the inside. We are not consumers. We are not the public, right? We are in the liturgy. And so and you can understand, like, you know, for example, like the it's okay, like we have pews here. I have pews in my church too. But you can kind of understand the resistance to pews in the Orthodox tradition, because they're saying, this is not a show, folks. Like, this is your life. This is your story. Like, the thing that you're in, it's something that you participate in. You are an actor, obviously not in the sense of theater, but you are an actor in the grand story, okay? And so that changes a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to condemn, obviously, the more passive aspect of modern art. It doesn't mean that now going to the movies is evil, or that, you know, I don't know, whatever, like listening to music is bad. No, I'm not suggesting any of that. But what I am suggesting is that understanding that and fully living that is like a root for everything else. It's like a foundation that is anchored in the highest thing. That if then it's going to move out into the world and then participate in the more, you know, secondary arts, like visual art and all the things that are fine that they exist, it creates this anchor which will help to prevent the disaggregation, the decomposition that we saw happen over the last 100 years. Because you have to realize that the way that it was set up in the story was already in a revolutionary way. And you can listen to them, right? You can even hear, I remember listening to some of the new atheists talking about that, and someone asked them, you know, about the sense of mystery and the sense of narrative and all of these things that the atheists, how do they get it? And they said, well, you know, it's no big deal. We just get it from art. We read novels. We go to the museum. We do that, you know. And so it was presented in the development as this great secular replacement for the liturgy, right? And some like, there's an interesting text by Roland Barthes, who's a French communist, mid-20th century, who wrote about going to the cinema, and he explained how the cinema had subverted the church. And he was celebrating it, like he wasn't criticizing it. He was like, yeah, we did it. We created a secular communion, you know, where we all come together. And the old cinemas, if you don't remember, they used to have curtains. Like they would pull the curtains, and there was like a light, you know, the light goes down, and like the seats were more like cinema seats, like theater seats. And there was a sense of like this moment of awe and of wonder that we participated. The thing is that if that's not anchored in something deeper, what happens is what happened. It just decomposes. It decomposes and decomposes and decomposes, and then you're sitting at home in your pajamas watching Netflix. Because that's the end of that, right? Like, you thought it would be like, we're all gonna come together and celebrate the greatest achievements of human life, and it's like, no, you're gonna be watching some stupid reality TV show, you know, at night. That's the end of that, right? It's like, it's not what you thought. And so, as Orthodox Christian, then it means that we need to embrace a kind of hierarchy also of understanding. which is that we have to be able to know and to remember and to participate in the fact that liturgical art is always the highest art. And why is it the highest art? Because it is the art that is dedicated to God. It's not dedicated to the human condition. It's not dedicated to the revolution. It's not dedicated to money. It's not dedicated to all these secondary things which infect the world of culture and infect the world of art. It is everything. It is the act of painting. It is the act of singing. It is the act of making furniture, of making vessels. It's the act of making clothing. It's the act of eating. It's all the things that humans do now brought together and offered to the highest. So it becomes a stable and real anchor for all human behavior, for all human making, for all human activity, and it holds it together in the highest and guarantees by our participation in it and our attention, right, our memory, or at least the possibility of always remembering what is the highest version of these actions, right? Okay? And it's not just about art. Like when you sit at home and you eat as a family, if you remember that the highest eating is the one that you come take at the chalice here, and that your participation in your family meal is downstream from that, and you pray before you eat because you remember how it all lines up in the right way, that it anchors that together. That's true of all human activity, right? It anchors it. And you can see, like if you could just pay attention to how history developed, you can see what happened. Right? The artists moved from writing music to God to writing opera, right, to writing nationalistic type anthems or whatever, to writing pop music, to writing mumble rap. That's all the way tumbled down into just talking about nonsense, and that's how it falls. But it's related in terms of a curve, right? And we're lucky because we're at the end of it. So if there was any doubt at the beginning, and we don't have to be angry at the people who maybe let themselves be seduced at the time. Now it's like, come on, we've seen where it leads. Like we know what happens. Right, and so this idea that liturgical art is the highest art, and that it is the source, you could say, of the highest form in terms of the language, in terms of the patterns that it invokes, in terms of the way that it strings things together, in terms of the storytelling, all of this stuff. Now, it doesn't mean that it's the most, what word am I going to use? It doesn't mean that it's the most exciting in the more mundane sense. And we have to be careful about that, because the highest doesn't mean that it's the most entertaining, let's say it that way. It's okay to be entertained, but the highest thing doesn't have to be the most entertaining. But if you anchor music, for example, in a society, in liturgical art, then you will have all the other, you'll have entertaining music, you'll have all kinds of things, you'll even have bar songs, all of that stuff will exist, but it will stop, it'll hold it together so that it doesn't absolutely collapse into complete nonsense, right? It'll kind of create this cohesion. And so liturgical art, I think, has to be the highest art. And as Orthodox Christian, it's not hard. We come to church, we venerate the icons, we listen to the music, we sing, we participate in it. Does it mean that every artist has to be a liturgical artist? Not at all. And that's a really big danger especially for Orthodox converts. Every Orthodox convert with a little bit of creative inclination immediately thinks they have to become an iconographer. Maybe, and glory to God if that's for you, but it's not necessary. Not every person in the church has to be an iconographer. But we still have to recognize that is the anchor and that holds it together. This is an example. I put up an example of a reliquary that I carved with an architect and designer, Andrew Boole, for the Russian family, for the Tsar and his family. And you can see that it has a function. It holds the relics. It's not just a visual painting. It's not something that you put in a museum. It actually serves a real purpose, but it's also meant to be beautiful, well made, to be a celebration of the best things that we can make. And if you want to understand, a lot of people, when they look at what I do, some people get confused. It's like, what are you doing exactly, Jonathan? You do this icon carving, but now you're putting out comic books and graphic novels and t-shirts. And it's like, what is happening? Like, what's the thing? Like, what's going on? And I would say that if you want to understand the reason why I do this is because I am trying to see how what I have been talking about, how I can participate in its embodiment, which is how can I take the 10, 15 years that I took to study Orthodox iconography, medieval art, medieval imagery, all the tropes of that, all of the patterns in that language, and how now can I apply it lower and lower on the hierarchy, let's say, so that it reaches all the way into popular objects, popular art. How do we do that? And that's one of the things that fascinates me the most, because, like I said, if all Orthodox traditional countries, they don't just make icons, they have all kinds of things. They have their own national legends, they have their bards, they have their songs, they have secular images, all of that is kind of part of the mix. So if we're going to participate in a renewal in culture, how do we now embody that, right? And I think that right now is what is exciting, because as everything tumbles and everything falls and everything kind of collapses, there's now you could say, an openness to a new story, like a secret desire for a new story, a secret desire for a new image, something that will revive not the revolutionary aspect. Say it this way, a desire to remember, right? A desire now to remember instead of live in this chaos of revolution, because people don't know who they are anymore. Right? So how do I now remember? And this is what I think, in opposition to the way I presented you the vision of art in the modern world, I think that Orthodox art can present three alternatives, which is not art as a consumable, but art as participation, right? Art also as, not as revolution, but as celebration, right? And then also art as a type of enlightenment. Enlightenment not in the modern enlightenment way, but in the sense of bringing light to people, not darkness, not cynicism, not just the passions, but bringing something that elevates them, right? That makes them more than what they were before. And because, like I said, we're kind of at the end where everybody is confused and nobody knows who they are, then people are also open and curious about that. How do we do that? So, of course, liturgy answers all these questions. Liturgy does all that, but like I said, here we are in church, and of course, glory to God, that's the most important part. But then if we're going to speak out into the culture, if we're going to participate in the cultural forms that are around us, what ways can we do it so that we encourage these three? And at least for now, the thing that I'm excited about doing is kids' books. And again, a lot of people are like, Jonathan, why are you doing kids' books and fairy tales and everything? Because I think that this is it's an easy one. It's actually the easiest one. Let's do the easy ones first, we'll do the harder ones later. The easiest one, because it's a children's book, a book for children, is a way you can access all three of those right away. Because reading a book to a child is participation, right? You sit in the evening before your child goes to bed, you sit in bed, you open the book, and the parent reads the story to the child. They are engaging in a relationship, right? They are not just treating this as a moment of performer and public, but it is a true moment of affection and mutuality that is being experienced. It's a little liturgical experience, right? To read a story to a child. And so I thought, like, this is an easy way to go about this, and kind of move into this space without slipping too much. And so what do we do then to make it celebratory? It's the same. So let's take the old stories. Now the old stories have been forgotten. Not only forgotten, they've been ruined for the past. Like I said, Disney doesn't even want to tell them anymore. They actually hate the stories that they're guarantors of. They hate the story of Snow White. They don't want to tell it. They hate Sleeping Beauty. They actually despise the stories that they've been guarantors of. The thing is that those stories are a possibility of remembering, because they are, in the fact that they have been around for hundreds of years, if not millennia, they hold in them something a little similar to our Orthodox tradition. It's obviously not at the same level as the sacred tradition, but it is a form of tradition, a form of passing down, a form of remembering, right? The fairy tales exist in this kind of vague medieval world that is the world of the ancients, that is being brought back and being remembered today. Right? Just in the same way that we remember the lives of the saints, all these martyrs in the early centuries, and we feel like we are connected to them in our celebration, in our memory of them. This is an easy way to do it. And like I said, how then to tell those stories in a way that's enlightening? Because in the past decade, the fairy tales have been told, but what's been happening in those fairy tales is that they've been told more and more cynically, with this weird kind of perverse derision in the story. I think Shrek is like the best example, where basically you have this like mishmash of fairy tales, and the entire purpose of the story is to mock it and to turn it upside down, right? And if you don't think that's true, it's actually contained right at the very beginning of the story, the very beginning of Shrek. I don't know if you remember how it starts. It's kind of a little vulgar, but Shrek goes into the outhouse and he opens up the fairy tale book and he rips the page out and he uses it to clean himself before he walks out. He basically wipes himself with the fairy tale. It's like, that's it, if you want. That's a beautiful, that's very, very ugly little synthesis of all the storytelling that's been going on for the past 20 years or maybe more, And so you can see it, how this kind of cynical approach. And so, but it's cynicism, like I said, like revolution, at some point it runs out. Because now, we don't even remember why we cared enough about these stories to make fun of them. So now we're going to keep making fun of something, but we don't even know what the value of it is that we're making fun of. So now is the time to retell the stories. And that's what excites me right now, is to say, can we retell these stories in a way that is celebration again? And I remember when I started studying the history of art and the history of culture, I remember reading authors who complained about Byzantine poetry. And they complained about it because they said Byzantine poetry is only panegyric. This Byzantine poetry is just celebration. It's so annoying. It's like everything about it is always celebrating something. It's like, yeah, that's actually the point. It's actually the point of art. It's what, all ancient cultures, that is mostly the way they understood art. They understood it as a celebration, as a memory, as a participation in the stories that made us who we are. So can we do that again now? I think the answer is, I think it's exactly the right time to do that. And we also notice that the children's books have also been completely infected in every single way. You'd think this is a joke. This is not a joke. This is a real best-selling children's book. For the progressives of the future, Aids for Activists. All right, so now how do we do it in practice? This has been the thing that kind of I've been asking myself, is how do we integrate it at every level? Not just you take a fairy tale, you tell it in a certain way, you tell it in a celebratory manner, not in a cynical way, you tell it in a way that hopes to be able to enlighten the reader. One of the things I like about modern, most postmodern actually storytelling, is that, like in Shrek, for example, one of the things that's interesting about it is that they have a kids reading and they have an adult reading. Have you noticed that? In the most popular kids movies, they do that. They have like basically a way for the kids to view it, and then they have a way for the adults to view it. Sadly, the adults version is always like dirty jokes, like for some reason. It's like, I guess that's what they think adults care about. It's just like some kind of sexual innuendo. But I thought that's actually a really interesting idea. Like, can't we tell the fairy tale in a way that the child is hearing a story that is just a beautiful, simple story that they enjoy, but the adult is going like, oh my goodness, that's giving me insight into why this story is important. And so that's the approach that we're trying to take to the fairy tales. Like, can we do it? Now, in terms of visuals, one of my great projects of my life, like one of my great fantasies, is that I want to see the Byzantine stylization in pop culture. Like, I want to see the beauty of the icons, the beauty of the way that things are represented, brought into pop culture. Not in a way that's sacrilegious, because that could happen. Like, you could do it in a way that would be sacrilegious, but in a way that is perfectly adapted to the story and that points in memory and in participation back to the prototypes which are in the church. So we've been doing it. For those who saw the Snow White book that is out there, we already had one pass at it. And the artist, Heather Pollington, who in the meantime, since she did Snow White, also obviously converted to Orthodoxy, and then has now been taking classes, learning iconography. She's such an amazing artist, and she just picked it up like so fast. And so now in this new book that's coming out, Rapunzel, it's really like the next level. So I'm going to show you some of those images. That's how I'm going to finish this. I want to give you the very first glimpse at Rapunzel. We haven't showed these images to anyone before, and so I'm excited to show these to you for the first time. So the key that came to us, and this I think it was Heather that found, is that there's a Russian school of painting called the Palette School of Painting, that when the revolution in Russia happened and the icon painters weren't allowed to paint icons anymore, they were kind of like in trouble. And they didn't know like what to do, like how do we continue to live, how do we continue to make things? And what they started doing is they started taking their skills and then applying them to secular subjects. And there's these amazing lacquered boxes that they would create and they would sell to visitors. Like there was a whole market for these things where they, if you look carefully, right, you can see that the stylization, the way that the clothing is made, the way that the faces are made, the space, is downstream, you could say, from icons. It's not exactly icons. There's something more fantastical about it. There's something that's looser, something that you would never dare do in like an icon, but the memory is there, right? The sense of participation, the sense of connection is there. Here are a few more images. So you can see that the use of space is very similar to the way that icons are painted. It's kind of vertical space. Also the capacity to show several scenes simultaneously in the same image. These are actually like the type of visual representation that medieval Byzantine art developed is very sophisticated actually. And so taking that kind of sophisticated capacity to intersperse narrative and to create different spaces, this idea of showing the inside from the outside, creating architectural spaces, you see that also in icons. All of this kind of movement into images that are now fairy tale stories, that are folk stories, sometimes history, celebration of important figures. And so here is, of course, the Firebird. Right, and so you see this beautiful lacquered box of the Firebird. So we decided, let's try to take this style, but we're not, and this is important for all the artists here. Tradition is not pastiche, right? Tradition is not nostalgia. Those two things are different. The idea is not to simply repeat things from the past for the sake of repeating them. That is as dead as the revolutionary trope, right? Right? The idea is to integrate the language, right? You learn the language, you integrate it, and then you apply it in a way that is appropriate to the moment, to the space, to the image, whether it's in music, whether it is in whatever. That is true living tradition, right? That is the souls of people being transmitted, like this, the breath, the spirit of people being transmitted from one person to the other, and so we also want, there's this beautiful early 19th century, early 20th century kind of medieval revival style that happened in the West. These type of illustrations that have this medieval sense, but are also taking into account realism. And so here's an example of a Russian illustrator, Ivan Bilibin, who also is doing this image of the fiber, but you can see that it's far more modern. And it's actually integrated some elements of modernism, like the influence of Japanese print, but how it connects in this kind of vertical space that Russian iconography had developed. And so we're like, we want to make something that is steeped in this type of imagery, but also has taken into account, let's say, modern illustration and modern sensibilities. And so here is our first image. And so here is our witch, who is holding, he's holding the Rapunzel. He's holding the cabbage in her hand. So if you look at the floor, like the way that the plants are made, the way that the smoke is made, right? If you were paying attention, you notice it's not the same. It has a kind of sense to it. If you look at the smoke, around the horses, all of this type of integrating this imagery into the story. And in terms of who here has read the Snow White story? This Snow White book that I wrote. And so one of the insights that I had that I wanted to bring into this story is I realized that Snow White and Rapunzel are like opposites, right? And so Snow White, you have this queen, and there's a young woman who is coming to age, she's becoming beautiful and desirable. And so in the story of Snow White, the queen is jealous, ejects the daughter sends her out into the wilderness to be the prey, to be in danger, ultimately trying to kill her. And in Rapunzel, you have the same situation. This young girl becomes beautiful, becomes desirable, but now the witch puts her up in a tower, locks her in, prevents her from having access in order to protect her completely from the outside world so that she doesn't face the abuse that Snow White had to face, something like that. But you realize that it's kind of two abuses, you could say, two types of abuse, two extremes, right? And so in our version, we have the queen in Snow White become the witch in Rapunzel. Like it's the same character, moving from one extreme to the other. And her story will continue in the fairy tale series, but it gives you an idea of what I mean by hoping to give people a little bit of insight into these stories. The story is still for like an 8-year-old, don't worry, you just read it. Kids will be totally fine. I don't explain any of this in the story. No explanation, it's just a story. And so here is another image of a hermit. And so for those who know Orthodox art, you can see the way that we've done the stone, the way that Heather has done the stonework and the cave. All of these are tropes that we see. If you know the icon of Elijah, for example, the icon of saints that are hidden in caves, we kind of moved toward this type of imagery. And what I love about her work is that you can clearly recognize, obviously, the iconographic sentiment, but there's also a kind of looseness and fluidity which is more akin to modern illustration. Like there's a kind of ink pen feeling, like ink brush, and a lighting that is a little more vivid, obviously, than what you would see in an icon, and a little more. So you have the scene in the tower. not also being afraid of exploring, of having a more fantastical imagery. But you've always seen this in icons or in where you have the sun and the moon as almost like as kind of anthropologized characters. So we're bringing that in there as well. So we have Rapunzel in the tower. I'm so excited about this. Like every time I walk and see them, I'm like, I can't believe we're gonna publish this. It's so exciting. So I just want to give you a little hint of what it is that we're doing. But I would say the conclusion to the talk is that this is the time, like now is the time. Like right now. Right now is the time. There are opportunities galore now. Then it falls back on the people that want to do this. Because one of the problems that we've had in Christian art, especially in America over the past decades, is a tolerance of mediocrity, call it that. We've had the sense that, well, if you make things that are kind of Christian, we can accept that they are kind of boring, kind of mediocre, and we'll kind of tolerate that because we love Jesus, But that is definitely the wrong way to go. Like, I think it's the very opposite of what it should be, which is that we have the best stories, we have the best music, we have the best visuals, we have the best everything. Like, we really have the Gesamtkunstwerk, we have the total. And not only that, we're in a moment right now, which unlike the ancients, we have access to all of it from the first century until now. Like, you can look at images from the very first Christians all the way to today, or you can listen to music from the Middle Ages until now. All of these things that we have a storehouse. The entire history is presented to us on a platter. And despite that, so many artists are just lazy. Like, just lazy in the sense that they think, again, in this weird revolutionary nonsense, that they're going to take it out of their own soul. If they're going to come out the creativity out of their own, imagination or whatever. That's nonsense. That's not the way it works. It's handed to you by those that came before you, right? It's a treasure that's given. And you have to dive into it, you have to study it, you have to learn it, you have to become an expert. An expert, if you're a painter, become a good painter. Learn to draw. Even if you paint icons, learn to draw, folks. Learn to paint, learn to draw, learn the music, learn the skills, become the best that you can be. Study the history, study art history, study the history of cinema, study the history of music. Study the history of the things that you want to be involved with, and know, right? And know that there is a way to save it. There is a way to baptize these things, but that it doesn't just mean doing it. It means reconnecting it, remembering, right? Bringing it back in a manner that will be a continuity and a manifestation of the memory of the true Gesamtkunstwerk, right, of the liturgy. So I don't know how to do it for all the arts. I have no idea. It's actually an amazing time because everybody has the opportunity now to experiment that and to try to see how can I make Christian skateboards. I don't know. Doesn't mean that you're going to have images. Don't put icons on skateboards. Don't do that. But is there something, if I make an object and participate in the creation of an object, is there a way that I can make it beautiful and in a kind of remembering of something, even if it is more on the consumer side, even if it is more on the passive entertainment side? Like I said, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a little bit of that. It's part of the world, right? But if we can connect it back, that is the key. And it's an exciting time too, because a lot of artists are converting. I have an image of Martin Shaw here. Martin Shaw is one of the best storytellers in the world. He is one of the best storytellers alive today. And he is now putting that skill to the service of Christ, right? He had converted to Orthodoxy, I think now 3 years ago, and he is seeing how to adapt his capacity as a storyteller into the Christian world. But there are ways to learn from these people. The images here, this icon is from Father Silvan Justiniano. If you don't know him, look him up. If you want to be an iconographer, he is an example of someone that is deeply, deeply imbibed in the tradition of iconography, but also has a deep knowledge of art, of Western art history, of illustration. He has just soaked in it, right? He has soaked in the imagery. And now when he produces icons, he has a level of subtlety and a level of understanding of color that very few iconographers have. There are many more artists that I could name. If you haven't read Loris, read Loris. It's for sale here. It's an astounding novel, and it is exactly that. Like, is it exactly an attempt to take all the legends, all of these wild stories from the past, and connect them in a manner that gives us a truly contemporary novel that isn't pastiche, that isn't nostalgia, that is truly, that defends its space in the world in front of art critics, in front of social commentators, but it is a fully Orthodox work of art. And that's what's possible today. And that is what, I don't know which of you here has artistic inclinations, but I encourage you to do that. And for those that don't have artistic inclinations, you have to support the artists. You know, because artists need patrons one way or the other. Like, it's important. And it's important for all of, you know, there's a lot of clergy here. You know, icon reproductions are cheap, I know. That's tempting. Get those laser printed icons. It's really tempting, I get it. But if we want the life of the church, if you want the culture, if you want the art of the church to be alive, you have to support iconographers and everything downstream from that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.